Hi. Hello, everyone. This is our first live stream, so we are figuring everything out as we wait for a couple of seconds for people to come in. Say hi in the comments if you're here. Alrighty, we're gonna get this thing started. My name is Lyndsey Chance, and I am the book writer and the lyricist for the show Will Wilson Saves the World. And I'll let Michelle introduce herself, who is the other half of this dynamic duo.
Yeah, so I'm Michelle. I'm the music composer and orchestrator. So yeah, that's me.
So, just a little bit about ourselves and about the show that you're going to have the opportunity to check out. Will Wilson Saves the World started as an idea a very long time ago, based on a conversation that I had with my mother over and over growing up. As I learned more and more about my grandfather and the things he had been through in his life, my question was always, how can someone so kind, who is so ethical and would give the shirt off his back to anyone, possibly manage to remain that way and turn into this person to be respected and honored when their life was filled with so many traumatic events and so much difficulty and so much struggle? And ultimately, it just came down to his choices. He didn't want to allow the events in his life to cause him to become someone who he couldn't respect. And that gave me an idea to not only preserve his oral history and his life story, but really communicate that message through a medium that I have loved since I was a child, which is musical theater. And that's how Will Wilson Saves the World was born. I put the first words down on paper in like 2011. And I would come work on it for a few minutes, and that would be it. And I'd just sort of leave it for weeks and months on end. And then when the pandemic hit, I sat down and finally had this time and this focused ability to make this happen. And I decided that I was going to put it down on paper and finish it, for better or worse, with this gift of this abundant free period that was unexpected in my life. And that's what I did. And I completed the book of the show and then sort of said, okay, now what? And did some research and decided to approach a composer about getting these lyrics set to music and having this audio world come alive to support the show that's really addressing a lot of heavy issues and relevant things for our society today. And that's where Michelle came in. So I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself and how she came to be part of the show.
All right. Hi everybody. So I'm a music composer, but I'm also an arranger or producer. I graduated from Berklee College of Music in 2021 last year, and when the pandemic hit, I had a lot of things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be composer, arranger, producer. So but I had started to gain interest into musical theater, and I was like, okay, so like I took this class about musical theater. I wanted to take the second class, but because of the pandemic I wasn't able to. So I got really sad and was like, how am I gonna get into an industry if I don't know like how to like meet the people and like get the experience that I need to like actually be in the industry. So this made me kind of like investigate, and I asked the teacher who had given the first class. I was like, hey, long time no see. So what should I do, you know? And then she gave me some suggestions, and she sent me a Facebook group which I never was able to find. However, I kind of like typed something, and then I found like the musical theater lyricists and composers, I think. So and then Lindsay, it didn't take too long for her to kind of like write like that she was looking for a composer. And I wrote back, was like, hey, like, I'm a composer, like, I want to compose. So I applied, and then we really hit it off, and here we are.
Yeah, it was a match made in heaven in a lot of ways. I posted an ad on Playbill, which is sort of non-traditional in the sense that a lot of writing teams come together through college or music programs, and they write for a long time together as a duo. And we came together in what you would consider a more traditional job posting manner, but Michelle was the perfect match because I was looking for someone who spoke Spanish, number one, because a portion of the show is sung and a portion of the dialogue is performed in Spanish. And so I wanted someone who could give that an authentic voice, not only in the language aspect, but culturally. And no one by any means is a singular voice for the Latinx community, but because I wanted to include characters from a variety of cultural backgrounds, I wanted to have people on my team and surround myself with people who could speak authentically to their experience as a Latinx person, and also who spoke and understood the Spanish language such that when people were hearing this music who were native Spanish speakers, it would come across to them authentically rather than a Google Translate version of the songs I had written. So that was a huge point of interest. And then Michelle plays a ton of instruments. She is able to work in all aspects, whether it's transforming this music into sheet music or orchestrating it or getting it ready for actors. She has so many skill sets that fill in the gaps of what is not my strength as a performer and a musician and a creator. And so the process has been incredibly rich for me as we've learned from each other. I was a musical theater kid from a young age. I did study theater in college, but I sort of decided that being a professional performer wasn't for me. I didn't think that I could make it in New York. And I had other interests that I wanted to pursue as well. And so I ended up going to grad school and then teaching high school theater for 4 years. And that was one of the most incredible periods in my life, as well as some of the most difficult in terms of just learning lessons about myself and how I work as an artist and a professional. And I would look in these kids' eyes every day and see myself in the sense of having these dreams that were sky high, but having a fear to pursue them. And one day I said, I'm telling these kids, pursue your dreams. This is your opportunity. What's the worst that could happen? And started to feel extremely hypocritical in that moment because I knew I had never pursued my own. And so I ended up moving to New York and doing a number of shows in various contexts as a professional, joining Actors Equity, having the privilege to continue directing, choreographing for various professional and educational theater programs, and just building a foundation until the pandemic hits. And here we are with a full-length musical that's at a foundational stage, and we're looking to take the next steps forward. And so we're doing a fun listening party so that we can have the opportunity to share the music and tell you a little bit about the story of our show so that we can continue to move forward in hopes that we can get it on a professional stage and have audiences be touched by this story. So we are going to go through these numbers and talk about them a little bit. So just for reference, the process of the show has been Michelle and I sort of gave ourselves a deadline and something to aim for as we were making progress. And we set an October reading date for our very first world premiere Equity 29-hour reading of the show. We got a full cast of characters representing a huge variety of walks of artistic life. And we had a very short preparation period where those actors were allowed 29 hours to rehearse the material. We had an amazing director by the name of Christy Thomas. She's also a writer. Highly recommend that you check her out if you ever have the opportunity. Her website is always writing for the number u.com. And she led these actors through a process of discovery for the book. And Michelle led them through learning and shaping the music. And we had the opportunity to hold that reading in New York City for an invited audience. And we learned a lot. Michelle, what are some of the things that you kind of took from the reading process?
I mean, it was definitely interesting because I didn't know much about like the behind the scenes progress creating a musical besides, like creating music and lyrics. So like, like learning about like readings and concept albums and stuff like that, it was pretty new to me, but it's also like fascinating, like kind of like being in the process and like doing all of it. It was definitely interesting when it was kind of like finally like time to like hire actors who would like learn the pieces and like sing and like it was definitely very I had never worked with such a diverse group of casting um before. Like I had done like really like small like people, oh, like like singing like this is what I want you to do, but nothing like this large for scale. So it was definitely very I learned a lot about myself, and I had to like work really fast to do stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely a very interesting experience because it's kind of like my first time just kind of like growing to it, but it was still like amazing. So yeah.
It was super surreal for me seeing actors bring this dialogue and these lyrics to life for the first time. And being that I was performing one of the roles, I was sort of wearing two hats and thinking through with our director some of the characterization and the relationships between these characters and their relationship to the music really inspired some changes and some augmentations and things we wanted to really expand. And so we'll talk about that as we go through a number of the songs. So we're going to start with the very first song. And this show is unique in the sense that it blends a couple of timelines. We call them the historical narrative, which largely is tentpoled, if you will, by the events that happened to my grandfather on my mom's side, William M. Wilson or Will Wilson, in his life. And to be transparent, the character Will Wilson in the show is just that. He's a character. We have definitely taken some artistic license and blended different events and changed small details and augmented certain things for the purpose of creating a cohesive narrative. But the main events that characterize this character's journey are true to life, and sometimes even the very specific details are accurate as well. Then we have the contemporary narrative, which takes place in 2005. And then we have what we call the in-between, which is moments where these narratives cross over one another. So I'm going to share here just a second my screen so you can get a look at the structure of the Act 1 book, and we're just going to be doing Act 1 tonight. We didn't record every single song just because of budgetary and time constraints. Hopefully you're all seeing this. But this is sort of the structure. So the show begins with the prologue, and the prologue takes place in southern Belgium in 1944. And one of the interesting things about this song is after the reading, we added an a cappella section, which you're about to hear. Most shows in the professional world will begin with a big, sparkly, up-tempo number, understandably, because it draws in the audience's attention. But we wanted to really set the mood and connect with the emotional quality of the show immediately. So we kind of went the opposite direction, and we started soft, still, and with this very emotional a cappella moment that almost takes the form of a hymn. And it gives you a glimpse into the inner lives of these characters who have been captured as prisoners of war by the Nazis and are about to lose their lives. And they're preparing themselves for that moment. So we'll go ahead and play it through, and then we'll dialogue a little bit more about it. This is the prologue and all of the things that make us strong.
Have courage this day as you face certain death, in fellowship with your brothers, as you draw your last breath at the hands of your enemy. Unrighteous is he, evil his scepter, bloodshed breathes through the echo of battle. We lay our lives down and exchange earthly strife for celestial crown. It is written in blood, in the oath that we swore, to honor the truth and bring peace to our shores. We gladly surrender the burden we bore, and fear that only the dead shall see the end of war. End of war.
Stand and face your fate.
Smiling through turmoil,
It was right before Christmas in 1944.
distress makes us strong.
In 1944, the massacre at Malmedy facilitated the mass murder of over 80 American prisoners of war in southern Belgium.
Hitler ordered one last desperate attempt to break through enemy lines.
We grow brave through the brotherhood,
History would call that campaign the Battle of the Bulge.
to which we belong.
On the heels of the Battle of the Bulge, the massacre at Malmedy was the greatest atrocity of its kind on the Western Front of World War II.
All the things that make us strong.
My buddy Victor and I were two of 120 American soldiers that the Nazis had taken prisoner.
All the things that make us strong.
No quarter, no prisoners, no pity.
All the things that make us strong.
So the second half was what we had in the original reading portion, which introduces you to several of the main characters. The fantastic, very seasoned actor there in the upper left corner is a wonderful man by the name of Roger Rathburn, who has been on Broadway. And I knew it would be difficult to find someone in the age range of Grandpa Will, who we meet right there. It's the year 2005. He's in his 80s. He's remembering his life and this tragic thing that happened to him in southern Belgium called the Massacre at Malmedy during his service in World War II, along with a lifelong friend of his by the name of Victor, who we meet later. We also meet the character that I play, Cheryl Lynn, who is a lawyer for the U.S. Department of Defense. And it's her job at this point in her career to prosecute escaped Nazi war criminals. And she's deeply into the pursuit of the man who shot and fatally wounded 80 American prisoners of war at this massacre, including Victor, who was the lifelong childhood best friend of her grandfather, Will. And that's sort of where this song leaves it. Michelle, did you want to talk about the process during and after the reading and what that looked like as we augmented and revised it?
Yeah, I mean, this song was definitely it was like right in the middle of our process. So like we already have worked on like a few songs, and it was kind of like in the middle of the songs that we were working on. And like Lyndsey told me like, oh, like you should kind of like do like an older style, like whatever. But then when I started the piano, I was like, you know, this is what I was feeling like. I was like, I don't know if this is what you wanted me to do, but no, this is what I came up with. You know, let me know what you think. And you know, we kept that, which is like what you heard from. I actually where is the end of war part? It used to be just like this. And then that part is kind of like the main theme, smiling the door, but like slower. So essentially, I was able to keep it when we kind of like expanded it with the a cappella version. I was like, I kind of want to keep this, but I don't know how. So like when I was kind of like working with it, you know, I was able to work with the a cappella version. I was like, oh, so this like, you know, this is perfect. Like I can keep this, you know. So yeah, I mean, that was very interesting.
And of course, the first version she sent to me, I was like, yep, you nailed it. I've heard numerous stories from my mother about the all-night singings that they would be dragged to as children to see these a cappella groups sing these gospel hymn style pieces of music. And so I really wanted that to become part of the oral world of the show. And so this was a great way to start it out, both with an emotional connection to these people we're meeting who are about to lose their lives, and the people in the current or the contemporary story who are fighting for justice for them. And so we have our first sort of meet and greet with those individuals. And we also come across one of the very important themes of the show, which is that very last line, only the dead shall see the end of war. And the history of human beings just being fraught with violence, and the notion that how long does that have to continue before we open up our eyes and realize that we have to rise above those baser notions in order to live in a just society. All right, very good. So the next song is called Seeds. And so this is our first foray back in time. So in the scene 1, it takes place in the hospital. We meet Cassandra, who is Sherilyn's mother, and Grandpa Will, or older version of Will Wilson's daughter. And Grandpa Will's in the hospital. We don't know exactly why yet. We get a real sense of his cantankerous spirit, which was definitely true to life and drawn from the man himself. And we sort of leave off that scene with him being wheeled out of the room to have more tests done. And Sherilyn mentions for the first time that she is in this desperate pursuit to try and pursue the man who harmed her grandfather and his childhood best friend Victor during the massacre at Malmedy. And Cassandra, her mom, sort of tries to give her a dose of reality and let her know, listen, this man might not even be alive, and even if he is and you catch him, you know, it might not change anything. And we sort of leave off the scene at that moment, and we track back to the 1930s with young Victor, a child of immigrant parents who traveled to Kentucky to find work. And we hear about how young Victor was born in Will and his family's front yard in a tent, and how they had been peas in a pod since they were babies. And then we also see Aunt Mary, who is one of Will Wilson's sisters. But because of the nature of his family and his relationship of abuse with his father, Aunt Mary really raised him and became kind of a maternal figure. And so Will is kind of falling apart at the seams because he is raised by this abusive man. He has polio, and he decides that the only way he's going to get past this horrible disease is to build his strength back up. The doctors thought he wouldn't live through the night when it was at the height of its, just taking over his body. And he decides he's going to strap himself to the tractor without much use of his legs and rebuild his strength so that he has a chance to get through and recover from this horrible disease. And that's where Seeds comes into the story. So we'll play that for you.
Deep in the ground, below the surface, possibilities abound here in the silence. When faith takes a root, hope sprouts all around.
The hardy hands of the grower can only reap the seeds of the sower. When you plant with hope, it rises from the ground. These humble seeds, may they grow and prosper. Seeds reaching for the sky. Can't be sure if you'll be strong or wither in the heat. But faith is stronger than the sins you're destined to repeat. Water them with love, may the Lord be a lamp upon your feet. Dormant now, but destined soon to be. Anchor
anchored and free.
He was cruel, not tender-hearted, and yet I wept the day that he departed. He taught me life was nothing more than a brutal, bitter chore. And yet I learned I had a choice. As for my life, I have a voice. I choose to rise and pass along a better life when I am gone.
These humble seeds, may they grow and prosper. Seeds reaching for the sky. Can't be sure if you'll be strong or wither in the heat. But faith is stronger than the sins you're destined to repeat. Water them with love, may the Lord be a lamp upon your feet. Dormant now, but destined soon to be anchored and free. Anchored and free.
Very good, yes. So we meet both young Will, the younger version of the character, and then Grandpa Will, or the older version of himself. So that's really our first moment of crossing over the timeline and seeing both of them simultaneously on stage. One as his older self in the year 2005, and one as his younger self in his memory back in the 1930s. And this gives us perspective from both poles of the character's life. This song is really thematic in the sense that it really drives home the theme that we reap what we sow. The choices that we make are the biggest impact on who we live to become. And that kind of agricultural metaphor really gets a foundation when we go back to Kentucky in the lives of these young characters. Michelle, did you want to talk about how this song came along over the course of its development?
Yeah. So essentially, when this song, most of the songs that I composed for this musical, I used the piano, but for this one in particular, I decided to use the guitar because, you know, like I was thinking kind of like folksy music and stuff like that. So I grabbed my guitar, and you know, the song kind of came naturally to me, for the most part. So it was kind of like, oh, so I really like this, and then like, you know, like I recorded like me playing around and like singing like a melody. Obviously, like after that, like I changed like some minor details, but you know, like it came to me pretty easy. I just sat down and started playing, and yeah, I mean, I really like the metaphors with the seeds, and you know, like it's a really good song. But I also was surprised to find how like actors had such like difficult time singing this song in particular. There was like, oh my gosh, this song is hard. I was like, oh, I didn't think it was this hard.
This was one that was a challenge for the actors, and all of these actors are professionals at one point or another in their career, so they did find this song really challenging. I think because there's almost an acoustic sensibility about it, which really for me matches the setting, what you might hear on, you know, Will's front porch in the evening after everyone's gone in from working in the fields. So it's such a authentic way of presenting the song, but the actors did struggle with it. What I find really beautiful about this song is the way the harmonies are woven together. And you're really just getting this sense of a family, whether they're blood related or family that have chosen one another. And they're coming together in these difficult moments during the Great Depression to help each other become the best version of themselves. All right, very good. So we get done with Seeds and we transition back to the present time where we really start to meet characters from the contemporary narrative. So we're in an office in Washington, D.C. We see Sherilyn, who is Grandpa Will's granddaughter, and she looks a mess. She's stayed up all night. She's been poring over these recently declassified military database files, trying to find some trace of evidence where she could track down this man, Victor Lang, lies, Armand Lang, who her grandfather has told her about. And she's at this place of frustration, anxiety. She can't put together what she's going to do if she can't follow through and achieve the goal she set for herself of creating this resolution for her grandfather and his life and bringing justice to him and to his loved ones for what they went through. And so I decided this song was one of the first ones we worked on together.
It was the first song.
Yeah, it was the very first song we worked on together. And being able to get it right vocally for me was super important because it's kind of the crux and the background of who this character is. So I recorded it about 7 million times, and poor Michelle had to edit it 7,000,001 times. And I decided when I filmed it to do kind of a backstage montage version of it so that people could really see some of the work that had gone into the show. And there's also some clips of my grandfather, in particular one really special moment where before he passed away just this recent May, he was able to see some of the early work on the concept album and read some of the script. And it was so neat to see him trying to wrap his brain around the fact that we were making a production based loosely on his life, and how bizarre he thought it was that anyone would be interested in seeing this live on stage. So we'll play Where Life Meets Dreams.
There's a method to the universe. The stars conspire to create an order in the chaos, mysteries to contemplate, and the only thing that's certain is time and death and taxes and change. Fate is like an ocean, tossing wisdom in the waves, quick to change direction, where skillful sailors meet their graves. And you can't see paradise until you cannot see the shore. But where swimming with no land in sight. I pray to God that I survive and leave behind the shores where fear decides my fate. I am in search of something beautiful, mysterious, somewhere wild and free, stuck in the rhythm of what's dutiful, changing shapes and possibilities, no limitations, no liability, where my life meets my dreams. And love is like a war, a thing you can't forget, where lies are ammunition and truth is a threat. Surrounded by the enemy, love can't survive when words fail. Walking down a corridor, no light inside, no open door, I'll find the path where love decides my fate. I am in search of something beautiful, mysterious, somewhere wild and free, stuck in the rhythm of what's dutiful, changing shapes and possibilities, no limitations, no liability, where my life meets my dreams.
That last shot there was from our reading of the production in New York back in October. And yeah, that just chokes me up seeing pictures of my grandma and my grandpa and the footage of them. We did surprise add that last really high notes in the final recording and in the final version, which I appreciate as a vocalist. Michelle, did you want to talk a little bit about this song?
Sure. Yeah, so like Lyndsey said, this was the first song that we worked on. It was kind of like let's see if we work well together kind of thing. So yeah, and I just sat down. I was imagining this whole orchestra stuff. Obviously you can't hear that in like the concept song. However, what I had imagined was very kind of like very orchestral, very kind of like big, and very impactful musically. So that's how I went into this song. I wanted to be kind of like a little like I didn't want it to be slow. I wanted to be a little like active and stuff like that. So, and I also used a little bit of Lyndsey's like kind of like dumb melody that she used to like compose the lyrics and stuff. Like
I call it that. She's not being mean. I tell her, I send her what I call my peanut head medleys or my peanut brain medleys. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes my brain is like, okay, what do I call this? But yeah, essentially, yeah. After that, we were like, oh, like let's sit down and see like how we can make this better, and like until we got the version that you were able to hear on the video.
Yeah, I also wanted to establish throughout the book as well as the music and the lyrics that none of these characters, even Grandpa Will, are perfect. They all have flaws, and some of them are really deep flaws that really impact their journeys. And this character suffers from anxiety, and a lot of these are metaphors for what that's like when you try and describe how anxiety feels to someone who's never experienced that struggle before. And that's something I can really relate to as a person. So you're really getting a glimpse inside Sherilyn's mind. and what it's like to live in her head as you start this journey with her towards the hope of justice. And so then the office scene continues, and we meet Eric and Cal. Cal is Sherilyn's longtime boyfriend. They've had a steady relationship for a long time. He's a much more traditional masculine character. He has dreams of having the white picket fence and the wife and kids and starting a family and being able to put his career in a compartmental portion of his brain and leaving the office at the office. And then we have Eric, who we find out is an old boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend of Sherilyn's, who also happens to work at their office. And their personalities, Cal and Eric's, couldn't be more different. Eric is much more off the cuff. He's, you know, very fun and enthusiastic and has a quick turn of phrase and clever. And you really start to see conflicts for the first time between these three personalities as they're trying to work together on this pivotal case that could define all three of their careers. And they're sifting through these military records to try and track down Armand Lang. They have sketchy information which indicates that he might, like many Nazis after World War II, have gotten false papers from the Red Cross and managed to flee to South America, Argentina in particular. And Eric is able to produce this piece of information that he's found that might lead them to exactly where Armand Lang might be hiding. And then we transition out of that scene into another character's subplot. During this scene, we meet Sherilyn, Eric, and Cal's administrative assistant, who is named Elena, and she's helping them sort of organize this effort to find this escaped Nazi war criminal. And from this scene, we later go into her backstory. We go into a psychiatrist's office and we hear Elena talk about how she wanted to be a lawyer, but she ended up getting pregnant with her daughter during law school and dropping out, and how she married an army man who ended up serving and being killed in action in Iraq. And she's unpacking for the psychiatrist how concerned she is about her daughter, Edith, who is withdrawn and not talking to her and seems to be potentially depressed and is dealing with bullying at school, and who really is having a tough time dealing emotionally with all of the recent trauma and struggle that she's been through. And we transition out of that scene into sort of this dream world where we see Edith at her high school in the library, and she's typing on a early, like 2005 AOL chat room about the struggle she's going through at school and how serious it is as a challenge to her mental well-being and health. And we see all of the students around her. And then on the split stage, on the opposite side, we see a likeness of Armand Lang, the Nazi soldier who shot those prisoners of war at the massacre at Malmedy. And the timelines cross over, and we begin to see two very vulnerable people who come from two very similar circumstances. They've lost their parents. They've gone through difficult recent traumas. They're emotionally vulnerable. And they're both considering taking these violent actions to, in their view, preserve themselves. And so this song is called Little by Little, and the audience sees them in their own worlds in a split screen on stage, if you will, dealing with the same thematic issues.
Sorrow is heavy, let it go. Thank the stars if you don't know. The honor that is grief, the price of love.
The agony won't disappear. Every day I wake and you're not here. The dead can't cry for justice, so go I. Little by little, faith turns bitter. Words grow fewer, no rescuer. Secret sorrow, dread tomorrow. I don't have a choice. The bravest thing I'll ever do is make my story known to you. You'll regret
Never forget
making me invisible. Infamy is twice the fame. You'll never quite erase my name. It's etched inside the moment I got my revenge. When I'm gone, the silence will decry. Look sorrow in the eye.
Will I make my daddy proud?
Wrap them in a chastened shroud.
Lose her to the enemy of memory.
It creates a change that you don't choose. Even if we win, you lose. If I don't fight this battle, I can't win my war. Little by little, faith turns bitter. Words grow fewer, no rescuer. Secret sorrow, dread tomorrow.
You always have a choice. The bravest thing you'll ever do is fight your fear and make it through.
You'll regret.
Never forget.
You are not invisible.
Infamy is twice the fame. You'll never quite erase my name. It's etched inside the moment I got my revenge. When I'm gone, the silence will decry. Look sorrow in the eye.
Look me in the eye.
Look sorrow in the eye.
So basically, you have two people in two totally different time periods who are faced with the same essential choice. And in creating these characters, particularly Edith, who is considering taking violent action against her classmates, particularly in 2005, which was just a few years past the Columbine school shooting, I did a lot of study on what psychologists have found that links the various school shooters across time together. And the answer I found is very little. They tend to be male, which is why it was interesting for us to flip this character into a female or a non-binary perspective. And they become suicidal or have suicidal ideation just before they act in these tragic and terrible ways. And they experience a depth of emotional trauma that's immeasurable that sort of leads up to these moments. And that's really the only things that psychologists can deduce that they have in common. The other observation, particularly for Edith, is that when these tragedies happen in our worlds, we tend to just see this school picture of this little kid. We never hear them speak for themselves. And we sort of search as human beings for what could possibly be the reason that this person could justify in their own mind taking such a terrible step in terms of violence. And so here we have two people who at this point in the narrative, we only know are considering following through with these actions. And we're wondering, as we are with most of the characters in this show, what drives human beings to do what they do? What causes one human being to do one action and another human being in similar circumstances to do the opposite thing?
I honestly love this song so much. So like we kind of like did like a pop rock outline for this song. So kind of like, you know, like guitars and stuff like that. So yeah, it was really interesting because for me I was like, you know, how do I like convey this kind of like angry teenager and like this, you know, mad like future Nazi essentially, who are kind of like, you know, connecting them both. And essentially I kind of like made like a little bit their own melody. So like, you know, she Chloe, which is the actor that's doing, you know, the young girl, she's singing in like one melody, so da 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 da, and then James, who's doing Lang, he's doing da 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 da. So it's kind of like opposite, like they're kind of like doing opposite melodies, but they're kind of like connected in the at the same time. So it was really interesting, kind of like trying to deal with that because I also wanted him to be kind of like a Barry sounding. So yeah, and I really like this song like a lot.
Yeah, some of the awesome things, in my humble opinion, about the show is that it ranges widely in terms of genre, from 1940s pop, jazz, big band music, all the way up to like punk rock, essentially, with this piece. And there's some contemporary musical theater in there as well. And so what Michelle does so intricately and brilliantly is come up with a way to make a musical through line through all these different timelines that sort of connects all these characters from different backgrounds and in different timelines. And this is really a great example of that, I feel. All right, so then after Little by Little, we go in back to the hospital. One of the pieces we didn't record that we added since the reading is called Eva Lou Wilson, tongue-tied, which was in real life my grandfather's mother. In reality, he lost her around the age of 2. In the show, we sort of collapse that timeline down to where he loses her at the same time he has polio in his teen years, maybe 13 or 14. And in this context, we're back in the hospital. Grandpa Will is looking at a picture of his mother, and he's remembering her, and he's remembering what she taught him about the man she wanted him to become before she was lost at a very young age, very tragically. And he flashes back to her funeral and what that looked like in his memory. The song is When You Can't Stand. And if I had to pick one song that really represented the theme of this show in the most encapsulated way, this would be high up there on the list. So you see young Victor, young Will, Aunt Mary, and then these funeral goers who are mourning the loss of a relatively young woman by the name of Eva Lou Wilson.
When you can't stand, rise above it all. Always remember, you can walk until you crawl. Even what seems far away lives on in your heart, and she'll always be with you even though you are apart. When you can't stand, drop to your knees and pray. Don't forget, we'll meet again someday. Look back at what she taught you. Store up every ounce of love, and know she's watching over you from her home above. When you can't stand, fall in love, fall apart, fall into place, finding your heart to fall in line, and you won't fall from grace. A mother's love is something you can't replace. Fall in love, fall apart, fall into place, finding your heart to fall in line, and you won't fall from grace. When you can't stand, fall.
So with the lyrics on this one, I really wanted to play with uses of the word fall, obviously, and then also with the concept or the idea of when you can't stand. Young Will in this particular context, literally can't stand because he has polio. And with the help of Aunt Mary and Victor, he's able to steady himself and stand up to do this eulogy for his mom, which is touching to begin with. But just exploring the notion of when you can't stand up for yourself, when you can't stand up for what you believe in the way you want to, metaphorically, what do you do then? And Will's answer is you take advantage of the fact that you're on your knees and you seek out the power of your faith tradition, and you seek out help from others, and you find a way to make things literally fall into place. What about the music for you, Michelle?
Yeah, so this song, I really like the lyrics for this song, like since the very beginning. I actually found this song to be a little bit of a challenge to compose to. Lyndsey told me to do kind of like a gospel style. It was like more or less what she was thinking. And and I listened to some examples that she had sent me, and then I was like playing around the piano. I was like, okay, how do I do this? I eventually came into the theme that you heard now, but originally I actually didn't like it all that much because I felt like it was like too simple. But then when we went with the reprise, like for me that was like, oh my god, this is like actually perfect. Like as a composer, I'm some like we're sometimes like composers, we're so critical of each other, like oh my gosh, like why is this not perfect, what is like a better way, or like better chords or better melody or better whatever, like it's really hard to go into like a career where like there's so many factors that you have to take into consideration, and you have to have like creativity, and sometimes you like go wondering like, oh, like am I doing enough, am I doing like too much, like. And sometimes we're like overly critical of our own work. So at the beginning, I felt like I didn't really like the work that I did into this song until later. So that, yeah. But yeah, I really like this song because it's very simple, but like still conveys so much within its simplicity. And I was reading just a comment who like that about like the message being like genuine, and the melodies are simple enough that they don't prove the genuine nature, or the like harmonies or counterpoints compete, which I actually agree with. So yeah, I really like this song, and it comes even better into play when we go to the reprise of this song, which we'll play in a soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that we can overestimate in this time period, and any time period really, the value of music for expressing what you can't say in words. And this is certainly the case at this moment in young Will's life. And in our modern era, the old truism is, when we can't speak anymore, we sing. And I think that's one of these moments.
I also really like the like I said before, I really like working with the actors, and the one in particular was so well done. Like the one who's doing Victor in this song, like there's one part where he doesn't really sing, but he's kind of like acting like if he's gonna cry, and I just think that's so perfect. And I really also like love the actor who's doing John Will. He's like insanely talented, and he puts so much into this.
So young. He's like not far from the actual age that he's playing at this moment in the particular script. And yeah, just has just this natural sensibility about being young and naive, but at the same time going through far more at this young age than most of us face in a lifetime. Yes. So after we see this memory of Will's mother's funeral, we then go to Sherilyn's home, and she's meeting there with her mother, and they are going through scrapbooks and mementos of Grandpa Will. And this is such a special scene for me because it really does mirror a lot of conversations that my mother and I had growing up in real life. And my grandfather would like take me back in his closet and like get on the top shelf and take down a box and show me all of these just pieces of paper and objects and items that he had saved since 1942 and 1944. And when you look at something like that in a museum, it's one thing, you get this kind of educational value from it. But when you realize that you have a living relative who was there and that this object was part of their story, it takes on an entirely new significance. And so in this scene, the characters are going through and looking at mementos, and they talk about how my grandfather married his wife Sally, my grandmother, when she was 16, and how he got into trouble when he was young. And then we come across this moment of him going off to war. And so we go back to the historical timeline, and we see Victor and Will at this dive bar in Kentucky where they're celebrating with all their friends this idea of going off to war and battling Hitler firsthand. And just the fun that comes from this song, in contrast to some of the heavier musical numbers, and also just the naive idea of this being Will Wilson's war. Like, he's the top dog, he's the one, he's going to be the one to conquer all of Nazi Germany, in stark contrast with the reality that literally wounds him later in the show, is a really interesting moment for the growth of the character. And I know, Michelle, this is one of your favorite numbers in the show. You want to talk about how we pulled out all the stops before we play it?
I mean, sure. So actually, this one, I think it's the song that I had like the longest, like that like it took me the longest to do out of all of the songs. This was the longest that it took me to do because you know, at the beginning, like kind of like similar to the last one, I feel like it was too simple, and I was like, okay, so like let's say how we play with it, how we like make it not that simple, how we like, you know, make it jazzier. Because at the beginning I was like, this is not jazzy enough. How do we make it jazzier? Like I have a degree from a school that is like, you know, known for jazz, so I should, you know, do this. But yeah, I mean, it was for me, it was the biggest challenge out of this whole musical. I think like originally when the first version that I worked on, it took me like 2 weeks. Well, I was in usually like every song I took like 1 week to make the music when we first started working, and this one like was like 2 weeks. And then like after that I was like, okay, let me do some revisions and let me do some things. And um you know, like honestly, the last version is not too different from the first one. I just like instead of like staying like this kind of like more or less the same, like the melody kind of like moves more now. And I, you know, of course added like some brass section, which I think really kind of like made the song better in the sense that, you know, it actually like helps you see like how it's supposed to like go in the musical. And I feel like it wouldn't be the same if it was just the piano in there. So yeah,
Right.
I mean this one, like I did like everything I could, so it's kind of like the song that kind of like defines World the most, as in like this is like my moment, this is, you know, me, and I'm gonna go there and stuff like that. So I wanted the song to kind of like signify that as well.
Right. Both Victor and Will have these moments to tell us what their dreams are and their hopes for their future are. And we really collaborated with Adrian, who's the actor who has been originating Victor since our first reading, about making sure that he's not just the hype man or the friend or the side character for Will, but that he is standing in his own voice and communicating what these next steps in his life meant to him, and what going off to war and joining the army meant, not only as a patriotic gesture, but as an opportunity for him to be the first person in his migrant immigrant family to go to college and to have a better future. And later, when those dreams get shattered, it becomes even more heartbreaking because we see him in this state of hopeful youth in this song. So imagine swing dancing, lifts, turns, just an all around good time. And here is Will Wilson's War featuring some of Michelle's talented friends doing the extra instruments.
Gallons of gas, 15 cents.
Coca-Cola at a dime.
Score a ticket to the show.
Find a girl to wine and dine.
Oh, it's time to celebrate one more night before we seal our fate. Set us loose from the farms, volunteer to take a bus. Collect salute to Uncle Sam, you'll become an army man. Oh, oh, we're gonna own the night, we'll be soldiers by daylight. Everybody on the floor, give the crowd so good what for. Pop the bottles, let them pour. This here is Will Wilson's War. Will Wilson's War.
Come on, let's even up the score. Trumpet blow and piano roar. Dancing uniform galore. Hey, what are you waiting for?
missing friend to me since the moment you left. Mama, love doesn't end when you draw your last breath. Before my heart could mend, I had a legacy to transcend. You gave me new purpose, a memory to defend. Fate settles me with every constraint, tattoos my soul with grit and war paint. I will rise above it all, conquer evil and stand tall. Your sainted face set in my mind, I'll have courage and be kind. My honor unbowed, I'll leave the past behind and make you proud. I can't go on if I don't try to be the man you raised before I die. Danger is ahead, but I'll stand strong and be bold. Future's unclear, but tomorrow destiny unfolds. Live as a zero, die a hero, God'll be my strength. Set us loose from the farms, volunteer to take up arms. Polite salute to Uncle Sam, you become an army man. Oh, oh, we're gonna own the night, we'll be soldiers by daylight.
We're making the world wider. I feel like I'm in the pinnacle, no longer lost and cynical. Forget the draft, I volunteer. Won't waste my life another year. I won't follow, I'm gonna steer. Kick my future into gear. I'll travel the world, collect my service pay. Save a bit for a rainy day. See what I mean what I say. Buy a well-filled house down by the bay. I'll expand my knowledge for son to go to college. Together we will rise. Set us loose from the farms, volunteer to take up arms. Polite salute to Uncle Sam, you become an army man. Whoa, oh, we're gonna own the night, we'll be soldiers by daylight.
Friend, these boys gonna fight till the bitter end. Before we wish them well and give the Nazis hell, let's send them off with the victory yell.
Will Wilson's war. Pressed uniform and brand new shoes.
A trip to France and Germany.
Working hard and getting paid.
A homecoming kiss and a big parade.
With the tractor driving, church reviving, still surviving, this guy's thriving. Watch out, Hitler, he's arriving!
Will Wilson's war. Will Wilson's war. Will Wilson's war.
I honestly forgot just how much like I had like added into this song. You know, I had to add a drum solo and like, you know, vocal solo and stuff like that because I really remember just like, you know, I kind of like want to make this on this bigger, so like let's add this kind of like, you know, this impactful part, so like, you know, it's more impactful and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, this was the first one we produced, and for the concept album, that is. And for a bit of a glimpse inside that process, it is a puzzle with many pieces. And so we have to have Michelle obviously record the music. The actors have to learn it. Then they have to send in just a vocal recording of their particular parts. And then Michelle stitches all of those different recordings together into a mix. And then it got sent to me. And then I had to take each actor's film and match it up to their mouths, essentially, of their recordings, and place all the different pictures and all that good stuff until we had a cohesive product for each song. And this was quite the undertaking as the very first one that we did.
And I was the mixer, so you know, I was editing all the audio, so it was, you know,
but it was worth it. I think it really inspired our cast because we allowed them to see this one as we got more into depth in the album and get them excited for what that final product was actually going to look like. So that one has a special place as the very first kickoff to the concept album. And we can never repay these actors for the time and the dedication and the talent that they put into these recordings, because they really did just elevate and lift these songs off the ground beyond what we could have imagined. So we're still in the same scene. They're still going through photos, reminiscing about Grandpa Will, talking about the conversation I mentioned early in the chat about how did he become this person of integrity despite all that had happened to him in his life. And she really says a profound line, Cassandra, the mom, that something along the lines of, you know, I guess when you come from chaos, you find a way to repair your world. And that's really such a thematic element of the way this story is told. So they get in a kind of mini argument, Sherilyn and her mom, at the end of this, where once again, Sherilyn's mom is sort of trying to bring her down to reality and explain to her that, like, it's 1 in a million odds that you're even going to find this guy. And when you do, it's even less likely that you'll be able to prosecute him, and even less likely than that to get him convicted. And Sherilyn is so deep in her obsession, if you will, to bring this to fruition that she just doesn't have the ears to hear that. And she sort of storms out and said, I don't think you understand. Like, this is no longer a choice for me. I have to do this. It has to be done. And I have to be the one to complete the mission. And so we get another kind of split screen where we have two contemporary characters in different parts of the stage that are singing about the same thematic element, which is their concern for their daughters. And they're feeling like they can't help them in any realistic way, and really thinking through and almost blaming themselves for passing their mistakes and their flaws and the effects of those onto their children. And I've thought many times as a creator and just as a granddaughter how wild it is that decisions that my grandfather made in the 20s and 30s had the power to affect who I became almost 100 years later, and he had no idea. And that's really the crux of this song. It was not in the original script that I sent to Michelle. And this was probably the first combination with Michelle that began with the phrase, okay, don't kill me, but. And I added this song because I felt like it was important to humanize Elena, Edith's mom, as well as Cassandra, Sherilyn's mom, and give them a greater voice as they watch their daughters struggle through figuring out life. And so after Sherilyn storms off, this song plays. It's one of my favorites in the score, despite the fact that it wasn't in the original one. And the lyrics really follow this music metaphor, because once again, when we can no longer speak, we sing. And music has this ability to connect with our emotions and with these characters' emotions in a way that can't be overstated.
Playing infinite, collaborating in creation. Who knew? A ghost scribe in your story I would be.
Co-creating without predestination. nation in all, penning a person forging identity. The wage of my mistakes and passing on my demons, lending you my strength, bestowing shortcomings, and yet I yearn and grasp at ways to reach you, fathom your thoughts and fortify your dreams. Sing me your secrets, accompanied by tears, gospel phrase, a ballad of your fears, the cadence of the voice within, and the rhythm of your heart, an enchanting work of art. Compose yourself, duet a while with me, direct your path and live dynamically in harmony. Embracing pain and pushing love away. Sorrow is the friend you found in isolation. Pretending despair lurking in the dark. Invisible, but a cancer of the heart. Clawing at the surface, demanding to be seen. Heartbreak will spill over, and fate will intervene. If I could, I'd fight in your place. Sing me your secrets, accompanied by tears. Gospel phrase, a ballad of your fears, the cadence of the voice within, and the rhythm of your heart, an enchanting work of art. Compose yourself, duet a while with me, direct your path and live dynamically in harmony.
Those actresses are called or named Pat and Kat, which we love. And they really, I think, bonded through singing that song, both being mothers themselves. And one of our goals with this show is to contribute to gender parity in the theater, which is a sense of equal representation for men and women. Traditionally, there have been far more roles for men, even though men are a much smaller number in the industry than women. And so I really wanted to create these meaningful opportunities for women, and not just young women who are the, traditional 20s ingenue, but these seasoned actors who approach life from the point of view of women in subject areas that rarely get talked about in the theatrical canon. So we use actors ranging from, 18 to 80s in this show.
Yeah, they're such a good duo. Like, I really love them. And I don't know if you mentioned this because like the internet issues, but she almost didn't add this song to like the musical, and like it's honestly like she said, like it's also one of my favorite songs as well. I just really think like this was one that also came naturally to me. Like just the beginning, I was like, oh my god, like this is perfect. Yeah, so this song is like one of my favorites as well, and it really conveys like a lot of things that like we have like two older women who are not really all that common in the industry, especially like, you know, conveying, like talking, like having like bonding experience more or less, even though they're apart, but like kind of like together is really interesting.
Oh, and also just female duets, period, are rare in the canon. And so we love this piece for that reason and more. And I remember the first time Michelle sent me just like the scratch recording of this, and I was like, oh my God, this song is so sad. I was like, why did I write such a sad song? And Michelle was like, yeah, I love doing sad. It comes across. Yeah, I think that this song, it had almost no changes from this reading version. Yeah. All right, and then we get to the last two scenes. Scene 6 takes place in what we call the space between. And it's 3 pretty lengthy monologues that are done by Eric, Sherilyn's ex and fellow lawyer, Grandpa Will, yeah, and adult Lang, and then adult Victor. And it's really an expression of their inner monologue. And all of the monologues are drawn forth from Grandpa Will coming onto the stage and holding up a hanger with his army uniform from the war and looking at it and reacting to all of the emotions that flood back when he sees that object. And then it goes into these monologues with each of those 3 characters' idea of war and what it is to put on that uniform. For Eric, it's putting on that suit every day, what that means to him. For Victor, it's putting on this American uniform and yet still never necessarily feeling like he's accepted as an American, as a Mexican immigrant. For Lang, we find out more about his tragic past and what led him to be conscripted into the army against his will, and how his father was a labor movement who stood up against the Nazis, and how conflicted he is about taking lives, and yet he knows it's the only way he can preserve himself. So we get a really strong glance into the interior lives of these 3 characters. And this is a scene that I added completely since the reading, because these are 3 characters that we really wanted to expand on more after we heard how things sounded out loud and looked in person. And we did a little reprise of all the things that make us strong, which we did not record. And then the last scene takes place in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. Sherilyn and her boyfriend Cal are having a little getaway. He's trying to get her to relax and forget about the case. And of course, in typical Sherilyn fashion, everything goes back to work and she wants to talk about work and what they're going to do about this case. And they end up having kind of a conflict that results in this song, I Wouldn't Have You. And this one was not in the reading at all. Unlike Sing Me Your Secrets, which wasn't in the score until later, but what is in the reading, this one wasn't in the reading at all. And one of the reasons I sat down and wrote it in one sitting is because I had done such a good job as a writer showing the differences and the contrasts between the personalities and motivations of Cal and Sherilyn and Eric, that we were left wondering during rehearsal, what is it that brings these 2 people together? Why are they together at all? And so I really wanted to showcase the love between them and the space where they do come together and have a passion for one another. So this is called I Wouldn't Have You.
I wouldn't have you without the storm behind your eyes. Somehow the chaos in your soul fills me with peace.
I wouldn't have you without the darkness that you hide. Oh God, the courage in your heart absolves me of my grief. I have a fatal weakness for his hungry eyes, the promises he whispers that I know are lies.
Her face when she lets down her guard, unrivaled romance, passion unbarred.
Underneath it all, divine and strange, raw emotions rearranged, kingdoms fall when hearts enthroned. Fathom waking up alone when broken hearts are intertwined. Fire in motion, how they shine, and shooting stars cannot refuse to fall. I want it all.
I wouldn't have you in bits and pieces. The space between us disappears, lost in a kiss.
I wouldn't have your faith without the risk. Sainted sinner, what I'd miss. An addictive soul is madness to the flesh. I would have you at your worst,
to love you at your best. Wayward heart pressed up against my chest.
Underneath it all, divine and strange, raw emotions rearranged, kingdoms fall when hearts enthroned. Fathom waking up alone when broken hearts are intertwined. Fire in motion, how they shine, and shooting stars cannot refuse to fall. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all.
Alrighty, Michelle, what do you got for that one?
It was actually the last one we made, so it was pretty. I didn't have as much time as the others to really work on it, but it still has this romantic undertone, and like we can see how like they connect romantically and stuff like that. So yeah, I really like that one.
Yeah, it definitely has a sensualness to it that we haven't seen on behalf of either of those characters. So it gave us a dimension in their relationship that was much needed. And I sat down and wrote that one in one sitting, which is not necessarily common for me. So I think that one will continue to evolve as we take the next steps. But this is a really rich scene in terms of acting dynamics and tactics that these two are using to try and get what they want from one another. I've always said that character-wise in this love triangle, Cal wants Sherilyn to have what he thinks she needs, and Eric wants Sherilyn to have what she wants. And neither of those are necessarily a blanket solution for the issues that she's having in her life. And so she definitely vacillates between them at various points in the show. So spoiler alert, after this song, they go through sort of a very tongue-in-cheek kind of flirtatious scene, and he ends up proposing to Sherilyn. And she doesn't say yes. She says, of course, which is a term she uses strategically throughout the show for various reasons. And you can tell that she's a little conflicted about it because she's so focused on this trial and the job that she feels she absolutely must do to remain intact as a person of ethics and to stand in her beliefs. And so we have kind of a musical scene essentially called The Engagement, which we didn't record for the concept album. And then out of this conflict between these two people in the present emerges this conflict from the past. And we see the actual shooting of these 80 prisoners of war. And this is a reprise of When You Can't Stand, set specifically in the context of the massacre at Malmedy. Did you want to say anything about this one before we play it, Michelle?
Yeah, so essentially this one, like, it started really simple. And then at the end, like, I was like, oh, how will we add this, or we add that, or like, I at the end I was like, let's do like a whole big section at the end. And she was like, okay, that's your job, not mine.
And this is one of my favorite pieces in the show as well. I think it's just incredibly intricate and well done on Michelle's part in particular. And this is also the first number where we hear Victor speak in his native language. We hear him speak in Spanish. So in the beginning of the song, Will and Victor have this kind of very personal moment together where they prepare each other for their imminent death. And then it expands out to this entire platoon of soldiers. And then we have this sidebar of these Nazi soldiers sort of grappling with what they have to do.
When you can't stand, do as you're told. You'll be honored for your deeds when you are old. Even what seems wrong right now is vengeance on your part. And these cold men deserve this for ripping families apart.
It's so cold, so silent. It is strangely still, ain't it? The snow almost seems peaceful, doesn't it, Will? Cold, but beautiful.
My mom used to say that snow is God's way of making a dirty world look clean.
It's almost Christmas. I can almost smell my abuela's fresh tamales.
On my last day,
on this fateful day,
on this oath I swear,
I hope I made it clear
my allegiance
that I honor the
to this
homeland that I hold dear. I pray my wife and daughter can go on with this gift, knowing that I fought for them and love until the end.
There's a season for everything,
a time to build,
and a time to destroy,
a time to kill,
and a time to heal,
a time to cry,
and a time to laugh,
a time to be born,
and a time to die. When you can't stand,
this is what I should do to honor my family,
to your knees
and preserve their memories for a new age to dawn and for posterity.
justice, honor, and obey.
Long after I'm dead,
Justice, what you're fighting for.
my
Sacrifice of honor. And justice, what you over you.
And that is the end of Act 1. I really love that piece.
Yeah, me too. I wanted to say,
Yeah.
how we like we were talking about earlier the original one, like when you can stand, and then I was like, when I was creating this song, I was like, like how do I do this song, like the reprise, like, and then I was like, okay, so let's like move the tone. Well, I hope we start here, and then like you can stand, and then like kind of like did that kind of like thing, and I was like, oh my god, like that worked so much, and I would have never thought at the beginning that like a reprise that is like originally like gospel-y like would work so well in West tried to convey, and yeah, and like kind of like make it like very different from its original. Yeah,
I think particularly from the reading version, which was much less layered and much more straightforward, this one is kind of the most improved award since the reading. It's grown so much, and part of that was the inspiration from the actors as we saw them really working together in concert, and the show is on its feet for the first time. So we end Act 1 with essentially you hear gunshots ringing out at the button of the song and the lights go out. So we know that we've seen in real time this massacre occur, and we don't know what the long-term outcome for these two characters is. So we will be talking about Act 2 on Monday, but before we do that, I want to wrap it up by bringing in a very dear friend of mine who has been on the journey with this show since the beginning and kind of monitoring its development and inspiring me with creative ideas and all that good stuff. And he's going to talk to you a little bit about concepts for the costuming. And costuming is going to be so important for this show to be able to allow the audience to understand which of the three timelines they're in. Are we in the historical narrative? Are we in the contemporary narrative? Are we in the in-between? And really being able to identify all of these different characters in their different contexts. So I'm gonna bring in the one and only Jake Egan and let him talk a little bit about that as we close out our live stream. Hey, Jake.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
You guys have done such a great job. I just want to say congratulations. It is so good, and it flows so well, and it's so smart, and I'm so thrilled for you guys.
Thank
really,
you.
We were sort of speaking about this. It's wonderful when a show is written in ways that like it surprises designers, like it inspires and creates, and just sort of you go, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or it just clicks. So. I'm thrilled to be here, and it's great, guys. Congratulations. So yeah, I guess in terms of costumes, the show has all sort of the trademark or the indicators of a show that could be done only in sepia, or and then all of a sudden it brings to color, or we only wear black. And what's wonderful about it is that it doesn't need to be like that. The writing and the way it's structured, it's almost okay to get a little lost, because you'll find your way out through the story. It doesn't throw it all at you where you don't have to be like, oh, that one's dead and that one's, you get to play with that fluidity of it. And we were talking a little bit ago about sort of one of my sort of favorite kind of concepts that we're doing right now, in terms of the parallel universes and what's in the in-between, and what's in now and what's in then. And do we say this? Do we not say? I mean, I would say so what is going on? Oh, there we go. I think the most important sort of thematic stuff is it's looking at shapes, and it's looking at who's wearing what shape and what colors, and not so much like what's that terrible game that involves drinking with the colored dots, whatever. Like right foot on whatever, right?
Twister.
Yes, Twister, right. Or like a Rubik's Cube. It's not, it's going to be more about the stories they're telling and what themes are brought in and what visual imagery can be brought in and visual storytelling can be brought in into those themes through patterns, through textures. I was saying to Michelle, her music provides the melody provides such clear indication of setting or clear indication of concept that it's almost a designer's job to now play with those mysteries that are given to us by the lyrics, by the text, by the music, the melodies, and the fun stuff is that when you are faced with a project or a prospect like this, you have to really work with the balance of the music and go, okay, am I, who's overblowing right now? Like, how do I pull back, or do I need to be more forward, or whatever. What is going on today? Oh my god, I'm such a mess. Anyway, it's just been a long day, guys. Summer, I'm tired. But so definitely thinking about colors, patterns, textures. I think is a word that gets a little overused because everything has a texture. Flat is a texture, and so I think it's going to be more about interaction. And then also, we were talking about that transition scene that Lyndsey, you do, because I don't want to blow something out. I don't know how much you want, but ways of time traveling through costume and through the ripple effect, and how you will recognize some people from some scenes in not former lives, but in former ideations, that then you may find a connection with, or but not doing it in a way that we're not telling, and we're not necessarily showing either, because it's an interplay of the visual, it's an interplay of the words, it's an interplay of the music, and when that mixes and gives and takes and has this flow, it allows audiences are going to see the show, and younger audiences are going to connect to one side of the story or other, or there might be a mix, but each person is really going to be paying emotional attention to the story they identify with or the character they identify with. So it's really our job to then pull these unexpected reactions and connections to the characters that they may not have noticed, or suddenly gone, wait a minute. And it's at the very end that all the pieces come together. It's it's at dinner after the show that, one person's like, did you notice that this one was this one? And then that's when that group understanding and connection that ties this, this multi-generational piece together and to our audiences, and really fulfills it. And it's very much a beauty of give and take, I think. Yeah. It really.
We have had discussions talking about how one character in the ensemble might be able to step out of a past scene and directly into a present one, and really drive home this notion that the decisions we make in the now affect the future in ways we could never imagine.
And also the decisions we make in the now are not always the decisions we would have made later.
Exactly.
But then also seeing when we think we're being given a choice, when it's really not our choice to make, and that these patterns and history, and interaction and tragedy and love and loss and connection, they go on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We are very lucky to have you. And hopefully Act 2 will provide more inspiration for where we go from here.
I had inspiration up to here.
But we have
an
incredible team surrounding us as we build this musical forward, including Jake and various other people. And so, oh, my cat. We are
Emily the cat.
looking very forward to building to the next steps, and we're going to talk some more about that, as well as answer some viewer submitted questions in our next stream. So please join us on Monday. It'll also be at 7:00, and we're going to do a listening party through Act 2 and really try and make sure there's a full context for the way that the narrative develops, and that we see the rest of the music as it unfolds. So thank you all for watching and for taking your time to celebrate the monumental accomplishment that this cast album was. And Michelle, do you have anything else to say in parting?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all of you so much for coming and for supporting. Your support means like a lot to us. You know, it's gonna like help dreams come true, and you know, like I'm really grateful for this and for like the process from like the very beginning to wherever this show could go. So yeah.
You can follow us on our website at WillWilsonSavestheWorld.com, Instagram at WillWilsonSavestheWorldMusical, and feel free to contact us if you have any additional questions or inquiries. We would love to get this show on a professional stage in the right context and in the right moments. And we're continuing to build forward. So join us on Monday, and thank you for coming, everyone. Bye.